Good afternoon, and welcome to the very first episode of Meet the Mission, the show where we dive into the latest innovations in cybersecurity, AI, and defense, exploring how Parsons is shaping the future of national security. Today, we're tackling a big question. What's next for cybersecurity and defense technology in 2025? The cyber landscape is evolving faster than ever, and AI is transforming military operations. Cloud is redefining how we manage data, and cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated every day. In this episode, we're going beyond the buzzwords to break down the key trends, challenges, and game-changing innovations that will define the next year. Plus, we'll be talking about some exciting Parsons news, our new partnership with U.S. Army's C5ISR Center on Project Linchpin, a groundbreaking AI machine learning innovation that's shaping the Army's future. To help us navigate these topics, we have two incredible guests who are leading the charge in AI, cybersecurity, and defense innovation. Ryan and Jen, welcome to the first episode of Meet the Mission. I'm so excited to have you guys here. This has been, a huge process in the making, and I'm so ecstatic to be like a part of the journey of Parsons kind of showcasing our leaders and our subject matter experts on this YouTube series. So to begin, can each of you give us a quick introduction to your roles at Parsons and how you're driving innovation in cybersecurity, AI, machine learning, and defense just overall?
Sure. Jenn, if you don't mind, I'll go first. So Ryan Gabriel here. I'm the CTO for Defense and Intelligence, one of the business units in Parsons. And as part of my role, I drive innovation, I guess, in a few ways. One, I oversee the use of the IRAD budget within D&I. So usually ideas come from throughout the market. They'll roll up to the sector leaders who kind of prioritize them, and then they come to me to work with the strategy team, the technology team, which is my team, the BD team, and then Mike Cushion, obviously, as the president. And then we'll fund some of these cool and new ideas so that Parsons has new capabilities to bring to our customers. The other part of my job is really working with a lot of our commercial partners. So finding those leaders in cybersecurity, whether it's offensive or defensive, leaders in AI or cloud, and Jenn will speak to her role in that part. But bringing them together with our team, inventing new capabilities or new things that we can bring to our customers, and then bringing it forward. So it's a lot of fun, and having people like Jenn on the team make it even more fun. So go ahead, Jenn.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. I'm Jenn Bergstrom. I'm the Vice President of Cloud and Data Solutions here at Parsons. And I report into Ryan. So he talked about his organization. I'm a part of that organization and glad to be there. In my role, I see it as a foundational enabling role for our projects and programs and missions. And what do I mean by that? Cloud is one of those technologies that underpins the majority of all the work that we do and deliver for our customers here at Parsons. So in my role, I focus on partner relationships, making sure that we're getting the maximum value for our customers out of our cloud service provider partners, vendor relationships, making sure, again, that we bring best in breed solutions that are deployed on those cloud environments for our customers, and enablement, making sure that we set our teams up for success so that they can innovate fearlessly within the environments that we provide, because we provided those guardrails for them so they don't have to think about it.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you for doing the intros of yourselves. And this is my favorite part of these episodes, right? Because you guys are our leaders, you're the thought leaders. And so, we're going to hear all about the great initiatives at Parsons, but we want to get to know you personally a little bit better. So let's talk personal tech. What's the one gadget or app that you absolutely cannot live without? And I'm going to start with you, Jenn. So you go first. Tell me what that is.
Fair enough. So for me, the game-changing tech that I rely on every day is my remarkable paper tablet. Okay. It sounds silly, but it's basically completely replaced the way that I use paper, or the way that I used to use paper, for everything that I do. So anytime I need to take notes, anytime I need to draw a picture or create a graphic or anything like that, my Remarkable's my go-to device. I love it because I can share it, I can collect everything in one place, and I can search my own chicken scratch handwriting to find all of the
Right.
notes that I've taken. So instead of paging through a notebook like I used to have to do, I just do a quick search on my tablet and it finds everything for me. It's wonderful.
So have you ever left it at home and like what happened? Like were you crippled from that point forward? What happened?
Thankfully, I have not yet left it at home. It actually sits in my work backpack right next to my work laptop. So everywhere the laptop goes, my Remarkable goes.
Right. Okay.
But
I
it
just
would be
imagine a world where you're like, you left it at home and you're like, I'm not productive. I can't get anything done today. Right.
I do laugh at that actually, because I did have a meeting inside one of our secured areas and I couldn't take it in with me. And I had to
Right.
scramble to find a pen and paper to take in its place. That was
so
remarkably challenging.
I can imagine. All right, Ryan, your turn. What's the one gadget or app you absolutely cannot live without?
Yeah, so mine probably a little less interesting than Jen's. And funny enough, before I had one of these, I always kind of gave people who use them a hard time. But mine is my smartwatch.
Okay.
And I say that because with two young kids and, with the job that we all have where we're in our chairs a lot, my watch is the one thing that reminds me like, hey, get up, take a walk, get to bed a little earlier. You haven't got enough sleep this week. So I feel like my watch is kind of watching out for me and kind of on my side to make sure I'm being as healthy as I can be. So it's been good so far.
That's awesome. My husband, I don't know, he has like a Garmin. He was training for like some triathlons over the last few years. And he has this one app that like tells him like his body battery all the time.
Yeah, I got the same one.
You have that one?
I got
and
the
he'll
same
wake
one.
up and he'll be like, I just generally don't feel good. My body battery said that I only was at this %. So every time he's like, remember, my body battery said, so you can't ask me to do certain things. I can't ask him to do certain things because he's like, my body battery told me.
I love that. I gotta use that as an excuse more often. I think your husband's got the right idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure my husband would just laugh at me if I tried to use that excuse to get out of something.
Which is exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just like, I don't want to hear any more about your body battery. All right, let's just relax. Okay. One more icebreaker before we get into the, the good stuff. But one of the, since a lot of this episode will center around AI, machine learning capabilities, I just want to, let's settle this. Okay, what is your personal take on AI assistants like ChatGPT, Siri, Alexa, etc.? This will be super helpful. Or do you think it's super helpful, or do you think it's secretly plotting against us? So, Ryan, I'll turn this one to you first. What are your thoughts?
For me, this is a tough one because I think it's a little bit of both.
Right.
I think they are incredibly helpful, and I use them in everyday work and everyday life. So already, I think they've matured to the point where they're just super useful, whether it is recommending a better way for me to phrase something in an email or a better way to present something in a presentation. I can make custom imagery, which I'm not very skillful at by hand, but with AI, I can make some pretty slick things.
Yeah.
So I think the utility of it is there. I do think they can be used nefariously, but it's not in the sense of like the AI plotting against us necessarily, but more the designs of the people who build the AI, collecting a lot more information about me than maybe I want to share, and then being able to use that. So I do think we have to be cautious about how we use it, especially in the context of our work. Parsons has gotten through a lot of trouble to set up a CUI instance of ChatGPT, and one that doesn't share information outside. So we always try to make sure we use things like that to be safe. But yeah, I think they're incredibly useful. So,
all right, Jen, your take. What do you got?
So I tend to fall in line with Ryan on this one. I think they're very, very useful when you use them within their developed purpose and capabilities. Where I think we run into challenges is a lot of people, because the AIs speak with confidence and speak with assertiveness, people tend to believe them and tend to trust what they say. But the reality is that, ChatGPT and other large language models are essentially a huge scale probability engine. And what they're going on for probability is what the language is that they've seen before. It's not any real knowledge of the thing that they're helping you out with. It's knowledge of how language works.
Right.
And, as long as we remember that and we use it constructively within that constraint, super powerful tool. All the things that Ryan said he uses AI for and Parsons GPT for, I use the same way because it's fantastic for that. It gets risky when people forget that or lose track of that and start giving it more trust and more faith than they should.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It requires, trained people to kind of look at the data that's coming through to make sure that we have confidence that, there's no risks associated with using the outputs. And I think sometimes people take that for granted. They can think that they're just going to go to GPT, get the answer, plug it in, plug and play, and now it's made it so much faster to come to a solution or an innovation. But you really need to, vet that and walk through the crosswalk of how that data came out on the back end, right?
Yeah. So an interesting note on that, if you really pay attention with the different large language models, you can kind of learn the voice of each of the different language models. So ChatGPT has a specific voice, Llama has a voice, Titan has a voice, and you can begin to know which GPT was used by somebody when they created content using it. It's kind of an entertaining thing to pay attention to.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you're like, I know what this person's go-to, is because of the language, the way the language came back and how it reads. I understand probably what they might have used.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Now that's gonna be a new field of study, is being able to, how do you check the compliance and look at like analyzing that side of it? It's crazy. All right. So as you know, both of you, today's theme is future tech, what to expect in cybersecurity and defense in 2025. From your perspectives, what are the biggest trends shaping the future of cybersecurity and defense technology specifically in the next year? And let's start with you, Ryan, and then go to you, Jenn.
Yeah, for me, from what I've seen, it's really all about speed, in specifically automation. And I want to use the word automation instead of AI because it could be AI, but there is other, ways to go about speeding up the process. Some of the things that, as a market, we've been really starting to look at because we think it's going to be a big part of cybersecurity specifically, is adversarial AI. And there's two components to that. It's how can we influence other people's AI so that it has positive outcomes for us? And how do we secure the development of our own AI so that we know it isn't being influenced by other people? And there's a lot of different facets of that, from securing the training data that we use to the actual DevSecOps pipeline, making sure that people don't have access to code or to the test environment. There are so many, the surface area of the development environment for AI is so large, and there's so many different areas we need to secure that it's a really interesting problem. And then outside of that, as we increasingly use AI to both defend our network against adversaries as well as attempt to infiltrate other people's networks, we know that there'll be AI on the other side that is trying to defend against our attacks and vice versa.
Absolutely.
So the interplay of AI and what that looks like is a really interesting area of study. I think that it's going to be increasingly more important. So it's neat to look at.
Absolutely. Okay, Jenn, what about you? What do you think are the biggest trends shaping the future?
So there's been a lot of conversation in the news lately about ethical AI and about the rules of how we use AI in a way that enriches and enhances the lives of everybody in the world, basically. The thing that I think is interesting that directly applies to work with that is our adversaries don't care. They are driving forward as fast as they can with AI. They're doing everything they can with it, and they aren't self-constraining themselves. So that leaves us with the challenge: how do we innovate at the speed that they're innovating while still having concern and care for the human impact of what we're doing? For me, that side of things is fascinating, and I think we're going to see a lot of conversation and a lot of push to understand that. It ties into what Ryan was saying about adversarial AI and how we prevent that, how we detect that, how we ensure that we are protecting our people against that in their everyday life. For me, that's one of the big drivers. I also have to give a quick shout out to quantum cryptography and quantum computing.
Yep.
That's becoming more and more real day by day. There was an announcement on LinkedIn this weekend from a company that claims that they've created a practical quantum computer that's actually portably sized. So we'll see if that actually bears out to anything. But I think as quantum computing becomes more real and less 5 years out, like it's been for quite a while, that's going to start impacting the way that we secure our systems and the way that we monitor and manage our systems.
So you talked about sizing. Did they talk about pricing, right? Was that included in any of their, their press releases?
Oh, of course not. Not yet.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. I'll keep an eye out for that one. So we'll see. All right. So not completely switching lanes. I want to move into more discussion on advancing AI for defense. So Ryan, big news for Parsons, right? On January 22nd, Parsons announced its CRADA with the Army's C5 ISR Center in support of Project Linchpin, the Army's emerging AI machine learning program. Can you tell us more about this partnership and what it means for the future of AI and defense?
Yeah, this is something we were really excited about and something we've been working for a while. So Project Linchpin at its core is a big Army's attempt to start building capability and setting standards that would go across the entire Army instead of each individual program of record coming up with an approach to AI. So this is like a comprehensive Army approach that everyone can align to, so that there can also be some efficiencies realized by the Army, right? If there's a standard and one program of record buys a model, for analysis of signals and identification of signals, maybe there's other Army programs that could also leverage that model. And since everybody's using the same standard, it's easy to pick it up from one and drop it over into another. So that's the intent. Parsons was selected as the only company to establish a CRADA with this program of record. So it was really kind of a prestigious, honor for us. Our role in this CRADA will not be to set standards because that's what the government does, but we will go out and do industry surveys. We'll work with all of the leading commercial companies who build AI, and this includes hardware vendors. We've had long conversations with Dell, NVIDIA, cloud vendors like AWS and Microsoft, small little Silicon Valley companies that maybe are more focused on specific models but don't really know DoD standards. So we're going out and we're talking to everyone and finding out what the latest approaches are in everything from organizing your training data to how people train models to the format the models are deployed in. Do they need an inference engine to travel with them so they can run anywhere? Should the models go by themselves and then each program of record has an inference engine? All of this, the full development to deployment lifecycle of AI, we're going to look at and provide recommendations to the government on, and then they can choose to act on those recommendations.
So in keeping in line with that, like how will the project impact real world operations? So we understand that we're trying to drive the adoption across, but what will we see as a result of those improvements with the adoption and modernization of that strategy?
Sure. So there's a few target programs of record that have kind of raised their hand and said, hey, we want to be one of the first ones to participate in using what Project Linchpin produces. And one of them is an Army program called Titan. And what Titan is it's a huge vehicle, and inside the vehicle, a handful of Intel analysts sit. And they've got satellite connections, they've got local sensor networks they're connected to, they've got human data from users that are out there gathering information. All of this information is funneled into this tactical vehicle so that they can do intelligence operations, but way forward deployed, as far to the edge as they can get. Now, it's hard for 3 or 4 people in a vehicle looking at hundreds of different data streams, from imagery to signals to network mapping that highlights where we've got exploits already in place, or there's so much different intelligence funneled into this that really artificial intelligence is almost required now to help them make sense of it. And it's not eliminating the need for the users in there. At the end of the day, they're still going to be the ones required to kind of take all these pieces of intelligence and maybe put them together. But finding deviations from what's normal in this intelligence, or making recommendations when they're suggesting the weapons target pairing, especially on the cyber side, like what is the best exploit? Do we want to burn a 0-day on this? Or is there something else that we can use that's going to let us reserve that? We're looking at AI to provide all recommendations of either intelligence solutions that they're going to recommend over the operations side, or just things that they need to put eyes on because it's outside of the usual, day-to-day what the intelligence usually shows. So we're trying to incorporate AI into that to make their life, easier and to produce better intelligence. And the real world impact of that is those intelligence report go directly next door to the operations guys who are planning their daily maneuvers, whether they're sending people out or they're planning fires missions or any of the missions that the operations guys would plan. So it has direct kind of real world relevance to the mission. So it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. So as a follow-on to that, right, Jen, this is a question that I want to ask you. AI-driven automation is becoming a force multiplier. So like to what Ryan just said, I mean, we're trying to, shift focus and narrow down scope for the things that should be paid attention to or recommended, right? So what do you think are some of the most promising AI-driven innovations that could change the way we approach cybersecurity threats in the next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges that Ryan kind of touched at in his response there was the sheer volume and quantity of data that's coming in. It becomes very quickly overwhelming. Humans have so much capacity, and it's pretty immense, but we only have so much capacity to handle that level of data input. One of the areas that I see AI really making a difference and really helping contribute is in the anomaly detection side of things. So understanding the pattern of life of your data and of your systems and what looks like normal down at the multiple layers deep where humans don't typically get to see things, right? That's one of the areas where AI can very quickly become a valuable ally for us. Another area where I see it being a valuable ally for us is in the learning new behaviors and systems and identifying what the new normal looks like. Most of the systems that we deal with, whether it's out in the field, whether it's in test labs, are adaptive systems. They don't necessarily stay static over time. They change over time. And static models, like what we've historically used in a lot of cases with human in the loop helping make those decisions, don't adapt at the pace that the behavior can adapt, and AI can help accelerate our detection of that behavior change and make sure that the humans are tracking it and behaving in accordance.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Oh, Ryan, you had something to add on to
Yeah,
that?
if I could add one thing, because
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Jen brings up some good points there. And one of the things that I've seen actually internal to Parsons that I got really excited about actually came out of one of our recent acquisitions, Ceiling Tech. And they have a capability called Operator X. And really the intent of this is to help people with maybe less experience, more junior analysts complete a DCO mission. And to give a specific example, right? Say that their task is to write a report today on which ports on the firewall have been hit the most, right? Like where have we seen the most malicious activity, which ports is it? And normally a more senior guy would know the Linux commands, right? Okay, I've got to SSH to this machine where the logs are. I'm going to grep for these, IP addresses or these port numbers. And then he's going to get the data and he's going to build the report. But with Operator X, in natural language, a junior analyst can just type in, return to me which ports have been hit the most. And this LLM can then turn that request into a series of commands that it executes itself and then returns the information in a nice readable format to that user for them to do the reports in. So I think, I guess I just want to highlight it because one of the things I'm excited in isn't just helping like the senior analysts do their job, which I think is a big part of it, but also just helping, more junior analysts do day-to-day jobs where maybe they would need more hands-on training before they can do that, or just, they'd have to read a lot more documentation and teach themselves or whatever it is. But this can really help them get these initial jobs done and learn the basics without needing to know every technical skill. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's like the amount of time they would have spent pulling together the research to figure out how to get down to that data, they would have lost a significant part of their day. And now we still have to do the analysis, right?
Exactly.
We still have to produce the output or look for the outcome we were looking for. So what were you going to say, Jen?
I was just going to say the other thing that I think is really cool about Operator X that Ryan reminded me of is the training aspect of it. Yes, the tool can go out there and do the queries for you, but it also tells them what it did. And so it's not just a black box. One of the interesting newscasts that I saw also that came out recently was talking about how the widespread adoption of large language models and generative AI has actually been hurting the development of our more junior staff members because they're leaning on it too heavily and they're not learning how to do things themselves. Something like Operator X, where we provide that feedback and that guidance on, hey, here's how I answered the question that you asked so that you can do it in the future if you need to. That's invaluable. That's really important. And I think it's a very cool feature that they built into the system.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's, we're speeding up the time it takes to do, or, decreasing the time it takes to do something. So speeding up an outcome, but then we're losing some of that on, hands-on keyboard training and skills. So that's a beautiful balance of enabling people to grow and still continue to grow their skill set, but also speeding up how quickly they can do their jobs. So another question for you, Jen, right? Your work in cloud and data solutions positions you at the forefront of AI implementation. What role does cloud infrastructure play in accelerating AI adoption, especially for defense and intelligence sectors?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I like to say is we put in place guardrails, not barriers. And, I mentioned at the start of this conversation that in my opinion, cloud is a core enabling technology for our mission and for our customers and for our projects. And the reason why is because cloud makes things available, makes resources available that were out of reach for a lot of teams and a lot of people before cloud got them in place. Access to GPUs is something that's been challenging. You look at the demand for NVIDIA compute resources, you look at the demand for Intel to, chips that they provide, and the backlog on procuring those for yourselves. All of the cloud providers that we work with, whether it's AWS, Azure, Oracle, GCP, they've all made that investment. They have those partnerships in place, and they've already put into their data centers these compute resources. In some cases, they've even gone further and designed their own to make it even more readily available. You can look at Inferentia and Trainium chips and systems that you can get with AWS as an example. That accessibility of those high quality compute resources at a minimum upfront cost is huge for enabling AI and ML. The other piece that the cloud providers really enable for us is the secure storage of data. All of that terabytes, petabytes, exabytes of data that we're creating, that we're trying to run these models on, storing them in the cloud is a lot less cost prohibitive than storing them in your own procured storage devices. And it's a much faster startup because you don't have to go out and procure all of those resources in order to have the storage. Between those two, that's a pretty good accelerator for you when you need to dive in and just try building a model or working with a model or fine-tuning an existing model.
Absolutely. And the access to large amounts of data for training the models and all of those things. It's, that's a force multiplier in itself, cloud technologies. And I will say over the last few years, I know a lot of startup companies, and a lot of the offerings for the startup companies that I've worked with or kind of watched how they grew, they've drastically changed with their adoption of new AI and machine learning like capabilities that we never even would have been predicted that was going to be on their roadmap. So I also think that's like you're right. It's very indicative. It shows that trend of the more cloud technologies that are available, the faster people can come up to speed with their use and adoption of AI.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing you touched on a little bit there is because you've moved from a CapEx to procure all of the data center and build your own high performance cluster to an OpEx where you pay for what you use. these small startups and even companies like Parsons and other, companies out there, we're able to focus on paying the people and on bringing the talented individuals in to do that work rather than just on having to pay for the hardware or pay for the storage.
Yeah, that's a super good point. And it definitely changes how we're able to staff and how we're able to grow people's skill sets, right? All right, so
Definitely.
last question in this general topic area. And Ryan, this one is to you, but Jen, feel free to weigh in. With adversaries leveraging AI for offensive cyber operations, how is Parsons ensuring that AI-enabled cyber defenses remain resilient ahead of these evolving threats?
Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation that comes up, almost daily within the Parsons technology side, and all of this falls under the corporate CTO, who's Rico Lorenzo. So he has both security and technology under him. So there's kind of a nice joining of mission here as we're looking to protect Parsons infrastructure. Um, One of the things that I really like about their approach is not only are they looking at some of the top tier commercial tools, which we kind of procure and implement, but over the last 12 months, they have made a real effort to connect with teams within DNI who have been supporting DoD defensive cyber missions for a while, as well a little bit as, providing tools to the DoD offensive missions. And the Parsons kind of IT and security teams have really gone out of their way to try to get a better understanding of what not only are the threats of today, of which there's a lot of reporting on, but what do we think is going to be coming up in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, or 18 months, potentially as we get closer to more open conflict? What could they be seeing? And I think that kind of proactive approach and leveraging the skill sets that we already have internally is going to go a long way towards making sure that we're protected against those threats.
Absolutely.
Sure. And the other thing that I'd add to that is the work that Parsons has been doing within defense and intelligence on ML ops and on maturing the creation of things like AI bills of material, AI bombs, to make sure that we understand the progeny and the chain of command that our models have come to us through. That's a really big piece in being able to be secure and provide that confidence that what we're using hasn't been poisoned, hasn't been taken over by the adversaries, and isn't being used against us.
We actually had a really cool IRAD last year on that exact topic. So knowing that adversaries are specifically going to be targeting AI, because it's tough to defend against, right? When an AI, say a neural net is identifying something in a picture, right? It's been trained to identify stop signs. I'm just going to be really generic for right now. And every time it sees a stop sign, it tells you, hey, this is a stop sign. But when an enemy poisons your training data, it can do things, and MIT, specifically has published a lot of information on this, but there's been a lot of different studies where, people can slap a sticker, a tiny little few pixels on a stop sign, and all of a sudden the poisoned AI says, hey, this is a yield, or a speed limit sign, even though a human could clearly see that's still a stop sign,
right,
with a little sticker on it.
Right.
So with even as little as 5% of a training data pool poisoned, you can directly affect the outcome of the overall output of the AI. And because the AI is a black box so often, people just take the output and use it without really doing a lot of analysis on whether this is correct or not. So the IRAD that we sponsored internally was we can create hashes using the weights and the structure of the model. So how many hidden layers are in it, the individual weights within those layers. You can create a unique hash so that at least if your model has been trained in your safe environment, you've had custody of the data the whole time, up until this point, it's good. You get your unique ID for it. If it ever deviates from that unique ID in the future, you need to have an explanation why. Either we changed that model or somebody else did, and we need to take a look at how this was retrained or how it was modified. And so it's not perfect, but it's the initial steps of trying to secure some of the models. And we've even been able to do it with a lot of the most popular open source models, like YOLO, or a lot of the most commonly used ones. We'll work with the Hugging Face website identify like a baseline model that we're going to say this is good, and then we track changes from there. So some really interesting kind of research into the early beginnings of this domain.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a switch, right? And we're going to focus a little bit on some, cloud, open standards, defense innovation. And I know you're all over this, Jenn. So like, I have a few questions for you, right? You've been instrumental in running Parsons upskilling and gamification events around cloud and AI. So tell me, what have you learned from these experiences and how they could shape organizations in defense and intelligence, building their AI and cloud talent pipelines?
Yeah, so one of the realities with the new technologies, AI, ML, cloud, all of those that are just now really getting widespread adoption, is that we don't have enough people that are trained in those capabilities across industry, right? Parsons, thankfully, through the gamification events, has put a significant investment into changing that and making sure that we're positioned well and that our employees are positioned well in those domains. One of the things that I've learned from running those gamification events is that there is a certain amount of organizational and individual inertia that you have to overcome when it comes to new technology. With the rate of change that technology has been going through and the continuous onslaught of new capabilities, new technology, new knowledge that people have, people can get exhausted.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for upskilling our employees? It means we have to make it fun. We have to make it interesting. We have to give them a why it matters to them and why they care. And we've done that a couple of different ways. The gamification is a great example, but also things like the internal investment we've made, that compartmentalized instance of ChatGPT that we have that's safe for our employees to use, and all the training that we built up around that as a company. That's another core enabler for people that is relatively low barrier to entry, but makes it easy to adopt and adapt. All of that is building fluency across the workforce, and that fluency is really important. There was an interesting study that I follow that came out basically saying that you have to get 10% of your workforce knowledgeable in a new technology or domain in order to really effectively use it within your company. And the same thing applies for our customers, right? DoD, all of the defense customers that we have. If they don't have a good knowledge within their organization of how these technologies work, there's always going to be skepticism. They're going to be a little reluctant to adopt them. So that's one of the things that I think we do a pretty good job of at Parsons, is encouraging our customers to be interested in the technology and to dive in and learn about it too, and providing mechanisms so that they can get that learning through working with our projects and our deliverables.
Yeah. And speaking to one of the things that you said, I think that generally, even in my space, so on mission, on contract, I have a few folks that report to me in the organization. And as soon as I dropped like the Parsons GPT to them and was like, here, go get an account, let's get started, there were a lot of people who were very reluctant to even use GPT, right? And then now these same people, now that they've gotten access, they have their accounts, like every time I ask something, they're like, let me run it through GPT and see what other information we've pulled across FedSim, what other information that has been put into this model. Because that's the beauty of it, is that it's multiple people contributing. It's very specific to us as Parsons. So even if they don't have the answers, or they're not sure what the GPT is going to come back with, it's all based on data trained from us internally, and we can kind of look across the company. And I thought that was like, it's a game changer. It's really literally level setting the information and training the model to talk about our customer sets, to talk about our problems without all the extra added outside, noise and influence. And so now they're running everything through Parsons GPT, which I think is hilarious, because I couldn't get them to use GPT until I made them go use it. So, that's the really cool thing. Like you said, once we got that 10%, then it just kind of naturally flowed from there. And now we're all fluent in that space.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. Once you get over the inertia to start using it, then you build up your own new inertia of using it and it becoming a part of the regular way you just do business.
Absolutely. So one other thing that I feel is, many agencies are adopting a hybrid multi-cloud approach to improving resilience and flexibility. So what's your take on the future of multi-cloud in defense and intelligence, and how is Parsons positioning itself as a leader in this space?
Yeah, so multi-cloud is here to stay. It's going to see continued wider adoption across industry, and I will straight out say that the benefit of multi-cloud is that you can focus on meeting your mission with the best tools possible, regardless of where those tools are located. That's a huge benefit. That's a huge opportunity for us to, again, accelerate the force, accelerate the effectiveness of the solutions we deliver. There are challenges that come with that. Anytime you start sending data across multiple clouds, you have, data egress fees that you have to worry about. You have data latency that you have to worry about. So there are certain aspects of it that we have been focusing on here at Parsons as part of our Bright Sky Cloud initiative to make sure that the solutions that we're recommending and that we're building for our customers take advantage of the benefits of the cloud environments and protect against the potential disadvantages of the cloud environments. I personally believe we're going to see a lot more push into hybrid than what is currently going on. And you're starting to see that as we talk about inference at the edge and dealing with data, in the disconnected environments or in the environments that sometimes are connected and sometimes aren't. Hybrid is the way that you're going to have to go for your solutions there, because you still want to be able to optimize and capitalize on the power of the cloud environment and all that brings, but you have to be able to operate at those extreme edges that Ryan mentioned as well.
Absolutely. So, being in that space, right? What do you think, maybe if I could ask you for the top one or two challenges, right? You've mentioned a few in the discussion so far, but what do you think are the biggest barriers for cloud adoption in defense?
So there's two main things that I see when I look at cloud adoption in defense. One of them is data management. How are we securing the data? How are we moving the data where it needs to be efficiently, effectively, and in a timely manner? Mm-hmm. That's the first challenge that has to be addressed. And the second challenge is when you bring cloud into the picture, it changes the way that you operate. In legacy environments and legacy networks, you have the concept of securing the perimeter. Right, making sure that the perimeter, the entry to the data center, those known ingress points in the data center are secure. When you bring cloud into the picture and edge devices and IoT and all of this technology that's kind of converging all at the same time, you no longer have tens to hundreds of endpoints that you have to secure. You have 10,000 endpoints that you have to secure, or more in some cases. And that changes the way that you have to approach building your systems. That's why we hear zero trust coming up more and more. Yep. The concept of security at depth and making sure that we are checking at every step along the way without damaging performance of the system, that our communications are secure, that our data is secure, that our models aren't poisoned. That's a big challenge, and that's something that takes energy and effective action against. One of the things that you'll see at Parsons, if you look at what we're doing, is instead of DevOps, we're really truly doing DevSecOps, where we're pulling that security forward in the process. We're making sure that all of our teams are thinking about it from the outset. It's not something that's bolted on at the end. It's something that's designed in from the beginning. And right. That's a huge necessity for really addressing some of those challenges.
Absolutely.
I guess from my side, there's one thing that comes to mind with the challenge of multi-cloud specifically, and I've had this conversation with Jenn many times. When people think about multi-cloud, a lot of times they think of using it for redundancy, right? Like you don't want to be fully reliant on AWS, so you also want to be in Microsoft and Google or Oracle. But each of those clouds come with unique services that if you're not taking advantage of them, maybe you're not taking the full benefit of that cloud.
Right.
So, in my head, it's not always so much of, hey, we want to do the same thing in multiple clouds. It's, hey, we want to take advantage of Microsoft's ground station as a service. So when the data comes off a satellite, they've already got this extensive network of ground stations and the backhaul to get it back to the cloud. Let's use that. And then maybe in Amazon, it's their graph store. They got a really powerful one and it's got a lot of features. So I think there's like a line you got to walk where, you want to be in multiple clouds and you don't want to be beholden to anybody. But if one cloud has a specific, really powerful service, you also don't want to ignore that just because another one doesn't. You want to take advantage of it. So I think it's a tricky problem that I don't know anybody's solved yet, but but Jenn usually has good ideas, so I go with her.
Yeah, there's
Awesome.
definitely a trade-off there, and you really do have to assess what the cost and benefit of any given architecture when you're designing a solution.
Yeah.
And then one other thing you hit on, Jenn, right? You brought up zero trust, right? And so I just want to understand from your perspective, like what does that really mean when we're talking about zero trust architectures for either, cloud environments, AI powered defense systems, like all of the above, right? What are the impacts to like zero trust architectures?
Yeah, so a few key things that come into play in any zero trust architecture that's effective. One of them is visibility and monitoring. You have to have good insight into what's happening within your system. And if you aren't tracking that, if you aren't really paying attention to that, you're not building an effective zero trust solution. The second one is credential management and making sure that you're securing your credentials that you use to authorize and authenticate your system. Your zero trust is only as secure as the credentials that you use when you're attempting to authorize it. So, credential management, very important. And then really the third piece of it is when you're designing your interfaces for the different pieces of the system, you have to design them again with security in mind from the outset. So what does that look like? That looks like assuming that all data is encrypted in transit and at rest, and understanding how you access that. It's assuming that we're using good cryptographic methods to do that security and to do that handshake and trade-off, and making sure that we're validating that and verifying that and looking at what is coming down the pipe from a future technology perspective so that we can pull that in as early as possible and really use it effectively. It's all of those aspects of it. And then the other side of it is adding the overhead of checking and verifying every communication that happens can have an impact on the performance of your system. And so again, you get down to the trade-off. I need to be zero trust, but I need to be zero trust in a performant way. And so I think there's going to be a lot of work coming, especially as zero trust really gets pushed out into more of the systems we deliver. There's going to be a lot of work coming up on optimizing that and making that as efficient as possible so that the zero trust validation is transparent to the end user.
Absolutely. All right. So I've stolen the time of our leaders at Parsons here for this episode today. So I want to make sure that we kind of close out and learn more about what do we think future proofing for national security tech looks like? What do we think forward leaning, right? So Ryan, this question goes to you. You've been involved in the entire DoD product lifecycle, from early research to fielding capabilities. What are some of the challenges in transitioning innovative AI and cyber capabilities from research and development to actual operational deployment?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's several. I think this is a well-known area of difficulty, right? Transitioning from S&T over to operations. One of the areas that we see a lot of is the capability is built in a cloud, maybe, or at least in an enterprise development environment. But when it goes to be fielded, a lot of times there are tactical constraints. So the actual swap of the hardware that you're deploying to, whether it's how much storage you're limited to, or the actual processing power, or maybe there's no GPU in the machine and you were counting on using AI. There's a lot of hardware constraints that we run into that if it's not designed with that environment from the very beginning, there's a lot of challenges then in transitioning over that from research over to actually fielding. The other side that people underestimate is the training, right? So we built a lot of these. They're built to a set of requirements that were handed from an organization like TRADOC or some requirements organization. But really, from the beginning, a lot of times you need to think about how is the user going to use this? And who is the user? Are they junior? Are they senior? Is it both? What kind of helper functions can we build into this? And a lot of times, especially when you start on an S&T program, you're just trying to prove out whether you can do something. Can we actually develop, an exploit that, passively sits on this machine but can do XYZ things when we need it to. So it's very much proof of concept, but as you begin that transition, you really need to bake into it, well, how is somebody going to actually use this and how do we teach them how to use this? So those are definitely two of the challenges that we run into pretty frequently, although I'm sure there's many more.
I'm sure there's a ton more, but yeah, I think it's interesting, Jen. Like, in your opinion, is there any way to minimize some of those? We've prepared it or we've created the solution in a cloud environment, and now we're going to a physical solution. Like, anything that you have from your side, like expertise that you suggest to minimize some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the I wouldn't say easy buttons, but one of the tools that we use regularly is containerization and container management. And that gives you the flexibility of being able to install anywhere that can manage or handle containers. And you can handle containers in bare metal systems, you can handle containers in virtualized environments, you can handle containers in cloud. So that is one of the big tactics that we use is pulling that containerization. Another tactic that we use regularly is the microservice design.
Mhm.
And the benefit of a microservice design is that any given executable, any given piece of the system is a lot smaller and than a standard monolithic application. And so that gives you a lot of flexibility where, you design it for maybe a 5-node Kubernetes cluster, and all of a sudden you're down to a 3-node Kubernetes cluster. Okay, what can we do to adapt to that and to be agile to that different environment? Being able to downscale, being able to set the number of containers that you have available, or only pick the containers that have the really critical capability for that particular environment. That's flexibility that you can build into your design from the outset. One of the other things, just to kind of play off of Ryan's examples of challenges, the ATO process, the authority to operate, is a challenge. And from a cloud perspective, one of the big challenges with that is, again, cloud is different from on-prem. And the way you design systems for cloud and for those flexible, agile environments is different than a traditional monolithic on-prem, large data center type of deployment. And you can benefit from using cloud effectively through the shared inheritance model and take a lot of their things that they've already accredited basically or certified if you design your system correctly. If you design your system to not optimize on those, then you're basically making a lot of extra work for yourself and your team to get through that accreditation process.
Absolutely. Okay, so one more question for you guys. And again, and I know we've touched on a lot of these topics throughout today's episode, but I want to make sure that I ask it here for those people who might be skipping along through the episode. They might want to get to this question and see what this answer looks like. Cyber warfare is evolving rapidly. What do you see as the biggest cybersecurity threats to U.S. defense systems in the next 3 to 5 years? And how is Parsons preparing for them? And I'll start with you, Ryan, for this question.
Oh, man.
I had to ask
one.
it because I know it's on the people's minds, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously this is an area that's core to D&I's DNA almost. Like cybersecurity and thinking about challenges that we're going to face in the next year or two is something that I know my team does, the strategy team does, and then all the way down through many of the technical layers of leadership and to the actual developers who are working on some of these things. I think there's several. I think one of the ones that that is prevalent in a lot of our minds is just securing our networks. There's just so many different potential threat vectors to our networks, right? Whether it's on our communications hardware, there's not just now threats to like DoD infrastructure, but to commercial infrastructure that sits in between us and other countries, the gray networks. There's just so many ways for adversaries to kind of find ways in that I know that there's a lot of thought that's being put into both within D&I as well as through the DoD as a whole of the best ways of securing this. So there were several IRAD ideas that were put forward this year. We're still in the evaluation phase, but I'll assume that at least some of that will be funded. So it's an area of interest to us as a company and as to the country as a whole. And I think a lot of energy will be put into that thought.
Absolutely. All right. So this question is for both of you, right? It's a way to bring, positivity back into the final messaging for today, right? No, we're not gonna focus on challenges. But what excites you both most about the future of cybersecurity, AI, machine learning, and defense technology? What is the thing that excites you the most? So I'll start with you, Jenn, finish with you, Ryan, and then we'll close it out.
Sure. So I think that one of the things that excites me the most about it is how wide open the doors are right now. With large language models and with AI becoming more and more practical, more and more accessible across the board for everybody, we can do so much more at an individual level than we've ever been able to do before. And that is thrilling. The benefit of that is hard to quantify, right? Because it's so significant. You mentioned it with your team that once enough people started using Parsons ChatGPT instance, then now everybody wants to use it and it's really helping the team. That same benefit exists across the board, not just, within our programs, but within society in general. The challenge that goes with that, of course, is then how do we help arm the individuals, both our users, our customers, our employees, and the general public with the tools that they need to use that intelligently and safely. And, for me, that is every bit as exciting as the opportunity is the challenge of training people and giving them those tools so that we're using this in a constructive, additive way rather than in a destructive manner.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, agree with a lot of what Jenn said. For me, it's just how fast everything's moving, right? In the same way that cloud is like an underpinning technology across a lot of what we do, AI is turning into the same thing, right? It's not specific to a certain kind of problem. It's applicable to almost everything we do, from cybersecurity to some of the sensor to shooter work we're looking at to, just general intelligence generation. It's applicable to almost every aspect of what D&I does. And what I love about it is there's really no clear leader. There's not a company I could point to that just says, hey, they are the AI company. There's other companies out there doing cool things. We're doing cool things. But there's so much room to apply it in kind of new and novel ways that it's just an exciting time to kind of be in this business. And I think there's a lot of room for growth in Parsons with applying some of these technologies. So it's fun.
Yep, absolutely. Again, I appreciate you, Ryan and Jenn, for joining us today. This was an incredible discussion today. We explored AI, innovation, cybersecurity threats, cloud adoption, how Parsons is shaping the future of national defense. But before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to talk directly to our viewers, right? So to our viewers, this is what I'll say to you. If you're passionate about solving complex cyber challenges, working on mission-driven projects, and staying ahead of cutting-edge technology, you should look into joining Parsons, right? At Parsons, our people are our greatest asset. We are a connected community delivering mission-focused cyber solutions, and we're actively looking for top talent to help shape the future of cybersecurity, AI, defense technology, but just innovation, period, right? And for us, we don't just hire employees, we invest in our people, we provide opportunities to learn, grow, and lead. Jenn and Ryan both talked about, research and development activities. We do capture the flag events. There's gamification. There's a lot of things that we're trying to do to make sure we're upskilling our employees so that they are ready to help create the next innovations that are going to be necessary for our industry. And then on top of that, at Parsons, we know work isn't just what you do, it's also about who you do it with. And so that's why we try to foster a thriving culture with social events that bring together our employees, friends, and families to create lasting connections. So I just wanted to put that PSA out there for the folks that are going to be watching this episode, because there's so many things available to you here, the mission-driven technology development, but also the growth, and then just doing it with people that have, the same interests, the same passions, right? That is the true intersection of what it means to be, family at Parsons. So thanks everyone for joining us. Make sure you hit subscribe, drop a comment, and let us know exactly what excites you about the future of cybersecurity and defense. Have a good one. Thank you, Ryan and Jenn.